You restarted this course from the beginning at the start of the year? How at the start of this year? Ooh, how are you liking it, Hank? Since you probably already done, I looked at your profile and you've already done it before the 2023 change, right? So did you notice any beginning stuff? It's much better. Oh, I would love to hear your thoughts because I have not met anyone until now, like Hank, you, after you explained that to me, that did both. I've met pretty much all the people that I've met is before the 2023. So I'm like outside of the people who are starting around me, right? And they don't really talk much about that. So it's really interesting to get a take on someone who has done it. I know that I have two people, Lotus and Indy, who hop in, see what's going on, and then compare and contrast between the pre-2023 and the post-2020. I imagine you learn Japanese everywhere else by now and all that stuff, but I'm glad I restarted. I'm still about 10 units behind where I was. Oh, interesting. But I'm seeing different content. Is that how? I know this is going to be a loaded question, but how do you feel about the new content, like, or the new order or something? Like, is there anything that really sticks out to you? And I don't know where 10 units behind where you was. Where were you, by the way, before you restarted? This is a common conversation I have with a lot of people, with the exception of all the people who don't use Duolingo anymore because they use the pre-2023, and I can't really. You're currently on section 3 unit 1. I see. So you're still 10 units behind. So you were around mid, or actually I guess section 3 had 40 units, so somewhere like quarter past section 3. Did they have that many units? How many units did each section have back then? Oh, it wasn't even divided into sections then. Oh, man. Yeah, that's so different. Huh. Lotus and Indy constantly tell me like, oh, did you learn this yet? Or did you learn this? Where did this move? So we had a lot of fun brainstorming about how they swapped up all the paths. You want to say it was around 120 units. I see. Nice. You are the first that have ever been experienced enough to know what has changed, like literally in one way. Most of the time I've been talking to people who have either half the experience or no experience at all, as in most of the time people come in like, well, you know, this, you don't get to learn this, you don't learn this, you don't do this in the Japanese course, and I really can't relate because it's post 2023. I'm like, I don't get it. I know this. Like, well, you're not supposed to. I'm like, I don't understand. How am I not supposed to not learn something that Duolingo spends a lot of time teaching you, right? So one comment I get, yes, I was just about to get there. Hank. The one comment that shocked me, because I started Duolingo in February of 2024, was someone said, oh, they have kanji now. And I'm like, wait, say what? And then immediately when that day came, I did some background reading and I was like, oh, by coincidence, the integrated kanji stuff was after I started. So, or before I started, right? A little bit coincidentally before I started. So I had no idea. So it's pretty interesting. I love the kanji section. In fact, they changed it a couple of times already. I'm sure you have noticed. They already changed it a couple of times. Some changes, some thickening. Like the most recent update, they thickened all the lines, and then they made like curved lines like flatter, and there's some jaggedness to it. I'm indifferent. I think it's different, but it's pretty funny noticing all these changes. You've only been using Memrise for kanji before. Yeah. So the common thing that I get all the time is you either use Anki or memorize is another one that shows up, right? Anki, download like a bunch of kanji cards and go to town with Anki. Does memorize have like pen input or mouse input for their kanji stuff? I imagine you get to like write onto something. I absolutely love that, but I get why they incorporated other lessons in the kanji section so that the commonly confused kanji or reusing kanji is also important. But I absolutely loved that I was allowed to write them. Like, that's what I did quite a lot. It may be on mobile, but not sure. I see, Hank. How's it going? It's going pretty well. Carl. Young god, Carl. Going pretty well. How are you doing, Carl? What is up? Thanks for sharing that, Hank. Honestly, I wanted to meet someone eventually who have the motivation, right, to do it again. As in, you must have, like, it must be something else, a different type of experience. It's kind of like how should I describe it? It's kind of like a video game that you may not love a lot, right? Or you've grown tired of, so to speak. Like, you play it a lot, and then suddenly they decided, here's the rebooted version, here's the remake version, and then you have to ask yourself, do I love this enough to start over? And for me, even something like video games or even riding a bike or running, I do actually am a person who starts over and see things in a new lens. Even if the activity itself doesn't change fundamentally, I find ways to change it. So it's lovely to hear that someone who is starting the Japanese course again, largely in a way that appreciates, or maybe not appreciate, or find out ups and downs, right? Ups and downs of the refresh of the Japanese course. Keep me posted, Hank. And you're pretty close. You're already pretty close to where you left off, so that's pretty sweet. You're good? You've been learning Russian for the past 3 or so months. It's been a lot of fun. May I ask, Carl, what is your primary language? The reason why I ask is because I want to get a framework of how you're learning Russian. So oftentimes it's not, I've met lots of people who make comments, but they were referring to the non-English version. So oftentimes those courses are not created equal, at least in terms of Duolingo. Unless you're not using Duolingo, which is the first question I should have asked. How are you learning Russian in the past 3 or so months? It's not automatically assumed. Actually, the vast majority of people that I've encountered do not actually use Duolingo. So I should have asked first. What's your primary language and how are you learning Russian? It's been an interesting revisit. Just before the holidays, I had reached a point where I had stopped progressing and burned out. Oh, I see. So I stepped away a couple months and did light reviews. How did that help you? How did that feel with your are you feeling refreshed? Maybe have you been doing other Japanese related things while you were taking a break from this? I don't feel burnout at the moment, although I seldomly burn out anymore. I have burnout on things other than language learning in my life, so oftentimes now I frame everything around keeping that burnout at bay. Not a young lad anymore, so I'm not burning as hot as Icarus smashing into the sun these days. And oftentimes, so much of the advice and uphill battles that I have to contend with deals with very young, passionate people who are in a sprint all the time about what's the best, how to enjoy things, what is a good use of my time and whatnot. So oftentimes it's interesting, although I'm perfectly content regardless of how much time I invest in anything, really. You've been learning Russian from a tutor and your girlfriend has been teaching you native language. Been teaching you. Oh, I see. That's cool. And your native language is English. I see. I also listen to Russian podcasts that teach the language in simple stories. Ah, Fair enough. Right now, I have been using Duolingo for 63 days, including today. And then every time I find something that's interesting that is missing in Duolingo, like maybe an explainer or grammar or something, I have been actively investigating them and involving myself into more multilingual stuff around YouTube. So today I was introduced to another concept in Japanese, and now I'm going to have something in the evening to look forward to explaining. So this is the process that I've been using for a while now. I did spend over 2/3 of my life listening to Japanese, so it's not abnormal to be listening to Japanese and consuming Japanese native content. So most of the time I'm specifically speaking in stuff while contrasting to all the things I'm used to hearing in Japanese. That's usually the context in which I'm using Duolingo. It helped as I'm going through again. The grammar seems a bit easier. I'm picking up little things like I struggled with previously. Oh, that sounds so fantastic. Must be incredibly rewarding. While away, you focus a little more on vocab and kanji. Ah, I see. In what way did you use the vocab and kanji? I know you mentioned memorize. Was there anything else that you felt was very reinvigorating that I'm sure now you are using all of the above? You might be lighter on Duolingo and then incorporating other things. I've incorporated quite a few other things after 2 months. After 60 days, I enjoy reading grade books. I like grade reading. Grade reading is amazing. Occasionally hop on gshow.org when I think of a word that I want, right? And then I look at verb conjugators from time to time whenever I think of a verb that I might commonly use. I watch multicultural, like not podcasts, but interviews quite a bit. And I got more involved into like the language learning community. And let's just say that's a work in progress on whether I feel like I'm part of it or not. Sometimes I feel like I'm more outside of the community a lot of times, because I fundamentally do not agree a lot of times with the approach of sidelining emotional and psychological benefits than hyper-focusing on objective metrics like end goals and stuff. Like that constant use of the word fluency at the expense of the person's mental well-being is something that I actually think Duolingo is kind of exploiting, but at the same time, they have the power to make it a learning experience on how to manage emotional motivation and psychological health. Because burnout is quite real. However, the lack of any motivation makes it why I don't feel like I'm part of the greater Japanese learning community. Oftentimes, the greater people who know about fluency in Japanese, most of their advice come off as incredibly unfilling. As in, if it's fluency, don't bother with this because it has no redeemable quality. And it's like, what do you mean it has no redeemable quality? That's factually incorrect. Like, unless you're suggesting you want to throw shade at over 100 million users. So things like that, right? I've recently been trying to read elementary books. I did the exact same thing, Hank. Someone suggested to me too. Lotus, someone who had multiple years of Japanese comprehension. I am doing exactly that. I am on tadoku.org. It's a wonderful resource, and I suggested it a couple times to anyone else who wanted something not Duolingo, right? Because oftentimes most of my interaction is how to leave Duolingo or how to not use Duolingo. And oftentimes, instead of being confrontational, I offer that too. I like Tadoku very much. I can't believe you use Duolingo. Fictitious? Come on, not you two. He's joking. Oh, you're joking, right? Don't make me. I'll show you a don't believe. Let's see. I also sometimes watch Russian movies. Sounds. I haven't watched a Russian movie in a while. I think the closest Russian related thing that I've watched was Chernobyl. Russia related thing was Chernobyl. That was a brilliant show. Although I didn't finish it. So I remind myself I should go back and finish Chernobyl. I know that's not quite the same thing, but Russian related. It's fun when Duolingo introduces new words that I learn outside. I love that, Hank. That's my favorite thing. And it's even here's another thing on top of learning new words that I learned outside of Duolingo. It is hilarious, or it is really fun when I remember the person who taught me those words outside Duolingo. So, I stream only Duolingo, which then people assume I only learn through Duolingo a lot of times. But the people who are around here, they constantly have this urge to introduce new words, talk about things, increase my exposure. And when that word comes up on Duolingo, on stream, I basically call out those people and I thank them because it's incredibly rewarding. On top of that, even it's kind of in Duolingo but outside of Duolingo at the same time, as a shared response of how that feels. It feels great. Yeah, so I learned a lot of Russian grammar and it's very confusing, but there is a pattern to it. That sounds right. And you figured it out. I don't remember where I heard about it, but was happy to find it. Yeah, the Tadoku books. Right now, I don't think I have any other ones. I like Tofuku. So I have a bookmark on Tofuku's grammar's place. And Tofuku, right? On this site. And in the evening, I just pick random topics. Yeah, I don't care if I read the grammar point already. I basically randomly pick an article and then pick another article and then pick another article. So their grammar section is organized and stuff. It's yeah, today I want to learn about a verb grammar point. So it's going to be review or new. It's kind of like the way Duolingo does practice exam, practice sections. So Tofuku has an incredibly organized section on as many grammar points as they have. So I typically read myself in the evening to sleep a little bit on 1 or 2 grammar points each day. And that's and it's fun when the grammar point shows up in Duolingo. So this is what I do in the evening to go to bed. I read grammar points. Yeah, I can show you briefly. Whoops. It's kind of fun. So here's the bright lights. It's a little bit cut off, but here's the Japanese grammar section, right? And you can click on anything. There's any section, right? If you don't have anything selected, these are all the grammar pages. All right, and you can click on any grammar page, and on the right they tell you of all the related grammar points. So I just nonchalantly click on anything and I read them. If it's a review, and if I remember it, it feels really good because I still remember it. If it's new, it's interesting. So I just keep on clicking any of the topics until I reach a dead end, and then I go back to the original page, the grammar section, and click on whatever. So I read 1 or 2 until I'm a little bit tired, and then I go to bed. That's usually what I do most of the time. So sometimes I remember them, sometimes I don't. It doesn't really matter, right? In the long run, I will eventually get them. So when someone reminds me and I don't quite remember, at least I have enough context clue to hold a conversation about them. So this is where I'm getting my grammar most of the time. I think their resources fantastic. And kudos, heads up to Tofuku's site on making it kind of like an adventure. And that's kind of what I do for grammar. Other than that, I don't do very much anymore. I watch, or outside that, I watch anime with friends once a week. Tomorrow, I'm going to watch anime. We're probably going to try to watch the rest of Frien, right? And Frien happens to have a character in there, two characters that speak almost exclusively the way Duolingo is teaching, which is funny. I honestly, it was pretty shocking how how on point. It's a pure coincidence. I'm not saying anime does this all the time. Although I do have to take a shout out to Duolingo. I don't know if this is real or a April Fool's joke, but I still have yet to encounter this. But I don't know if you heard, Hank, where like Duolingo and on their like, I can't trust Twitter a lot of times, sorry, but on X, right, they said something about a collab with Crunchyroll, and the idea is to integrate anime phrases or phrasing. So if you're like into the anime culture, you might be able to pick it up. But honestly though, a lot of the mass dominant forms and the way they structure actually come up on very specific anime, and by coincidence Frien is one of them. So I'm having a awesome time right now. Two of the characters legitimately sound like they're speaking to me. Like I understand them, and then the other characters are like, oh yeah, there's a long road ahead because the other characters are speaking in a different type of setting, like a different type of personality. Nevertheless, pretty cool. Thought I'd let you know. You do use Duolingo to get some vocabulary, but that's all it's really good for. But if I really want to learn words, I use Google Translate and cross-reference with my girlfriend. I see that's what you... That's fair enough. If that's the only thing good Duolingo is good for. At least you know how to learn without being dependent on one method. Right, Carl? So it's pretty good. Pretty good. Sounds fine. For Japanese, I don't think that's the only thing that Duolingo is only good for, but it also overlooks the idea that Duolingo is incredibly accessible. So just as my 2 cents, a quick 2 cents contribution to this discussion. I don't get why Duolingo teaches the sentence the way it does. The dog. Oh, interesting. You don't? So you don't have the answer yet, right? Interesting. I will love to know when you can explain it. So one of the things that made me understand Japanese and English, really, much better now, is that I often come to weird things or counterintuitive things or things that are different, and I go out of my way to discover why. Like, explain why they structure it this way, why they interpret it this way. And through my adventures of discussing what Duo does versus others, then it's fun. Or at least to me, it makes me know more about what Duolingo does and what it doesn't, and then what other people do and doesn't. I actually spent a lot of time talking about the English translations of Japanese phrases, and then makes me curious about how Japanese people are learning English, because there is a lot. There is quite a lot. So most of the time I spent a lot of time not actually learning Japanese per se, like the literal acquisition of vocab. I actually spent a lot of time having fun discussing the implications of Duolingo as a tool versus the perception of people outside of the tool. But like when you would say a dog eats an egg, I it's fun to use, but I don't feel like just doing that will get you to fluency. Well, you don't get to fluency just doing anything. So that's the problem. That's the conversation that I have all the time, Carl. What you said was a double standard. So, just using Duolingo won't get you to fluency. And I will tell you from my experience, just my personal experience, not anyone else's. Total immersion, even total immersion, doesn't get you to fluency. Just total immersion. So just anything in my opinion, doesn't get you to fluency. How do I know? I speak a language that I'm illiterate in. I don't think about it. I don't think about sentence construction or anything, but I'm illiterate. So, this is why I tend to say that I'm a multicultural person. But there are a lot of multicultural individuals, at least myself, that can command language command sentence construction back and forth, but not fluent. So no fluency. So oftentimes I want to emphasize that you're doing a lot more. Do more. Mix it all up, right? So as far as I know, something combination of stuff works. The reason why I mentioned this is so many people, too many perhaps, I've worked up the way to tackle the "dude, man, stop using Duolingo" comment. And naturally I would say, well, why not both? Why not both? Why not all of the above? If you can appreciate that Duolingo can't provide everything, you know, if Duolingo can't provide everything, then axiomatically you know that Anki can't provide everything. Anki can't do that either. In fact, most tools can't do that. So hopefully we can reach a reasonable agreement that you need to do a lot to become fluent in a language. It's no trivial task. Just for the record, I'm not trying to be fluent in Japanese. It would be nice. It's extra to be fluent in another language. I think I have enough of this fluency projection. If you want to be fluent, yeah, you're gonna have to do a lot for sure. And Duolingo might not necessarily be the best use of your time, like most people say. But I want to give the fair shake that I hope, which most people misunderstand why I'm using Duolingo for a long time. The reason I'm streaming Duolingo is I get to have conversations like these. If I was a person who's like Ankiing and doing the best of the best, then generally that's not as interesting to me. I wouldn't be streaming it otherwise. And also, if I did really worry about how efficient I am, I would probably not stream using Duolingo or anything really. Let's see. Some of the sentences are odd, but I feel that's done intentionally. Yes, it is absolute. I agree with you, Hank. You know what's funny, Hank? I don't know if Hank is your actual name, but Hank, listen, you share a name, a first name. I don't want. I love that you're spending some time, but I don't know if you do. You know Hank Green? The way you talk and the way you're like being a little bit more reflexive on your word choice and stuff, as opposed to like leaning on hyperbolic phrases, kind of reminds me of Hank Green. And I quite enjoy Hank Green. But obviously shout outs to Hank from King of the Hill, but oh, so it's a nickname you've had since birth. Okay, all right, fair enough. These are not I think these are very endearing things, so just I don't want to make it sound like I'm replacing you or substituting, but you need to know the words they're asking for and not what makes sense to you. Yeah, so outside of Duolingo, I try to find other things that make sense to me, right? Like outside of Duolingo, I'm reinforcing everything that makes sense to me, or like additional things. And then when I come into Duolingo, it actually is kind of funny how they suggest something and makes me think, wait a minute, is that right? Or is that wrong? Like, what is that? And it makes me interested. I honestly find it very interesting. Like, this is kind of weird. And the idea that I could say this is kind of weird, it also means I have comprehension out of Duolingo. Like today, in this section, I was introduced to would you like to do something? Versus should we do something as an interpretation. Should we do something? And that something is the predicate, right? And that's pretty cool, in my opinion. And tonight, I'm probably going to go read about the interpretive nature of would you like to do something? So something like kikimasenka versus, I don't know, kikimashouka. And to me, that's pretty cool. I think that's fun. I'm going to have a fun time looking at people's interpretation and use cases for like shimashouka versus shimasenka in terms of the way Duo presented it versus other people, right? Yeah, I understand you. It's a mix of different things that will help me. Yep. My current goal is to be conversational N3 level, and I'd like to spend a lot of time in Japan after retirement. Are you in Japan right now, Hank, or are you planning on it? I will keep doing Duolingo for sure. It's good in some ways, like having the streak and leaderboards. I find it helps keep me motivated. I love that. I love that. Motivated for rushing every day, even when I can't ask on do all you did, like, yeah, like 5 minutes a day. I was using Babbel in the past, but I found it wasn't effective for you. I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, Babbel would be the other like like the statistically bound, like classical approach stuff. But for me, Duolingo is a bridge to very soft-spoken people. So I honestly think, I hope I can find more soft-spoken, motivated, enthusiastic people. However, that is way in the minority at the moment. I would say out of the 100% of people I interact with who have or have not or has done or know about Duolingo, 95% of them have animosity towards someone who uses Duolingo. As in, if you're a streamer who uses Duolingo, you will attract criticism from them, as opposed to being someone like you who uses it for what it does well and then do other things, or not strongly suggesting that I should stop because it's not effective to you. That's what happens a lot of times. So I really appreciate the way you're thinking about this, Carl. Yeah. Like, it's really tough. Like, I'm not here to tell you to stop using whatever your favorite thing is. Like, stop using memorize. Stop using, like, this one's better. This one's better. Like, I'm not here to push down other people's methods. Much like I expect that when you come here voluntarily, you're not pushing down my methods, but adding to them. So over time, I have found many useful things that other people have shared, but to me, I am more willing to accept the suggestions of someone who isn't diminishing my point, like diminishing my position. If you come to me and say, yo, let me just start it out right off. Duolingo is terrible. It's the worst waste of time ever. It's corporate BS. And then you go and explain what is better, then you haven't established rapport with me, right? It's kind of like going to someone's stream who's playing a Souls-like game, take a dump on the Souls-like game, and then saying, I care about you. So here are better games than the game you're playing. Yep, that's gonna work. Perhaps learning language doesn't improve your communication skills, because ultimately that is a really big hurdle. What does that sound like? Someone says that doesn't sound like gatekeeping. I'm like, that is gatekeeping in my opinion. You just relegated me to a second-class citizen outside of your perspective. Like, so I can't be part of your club anymore because I use something you don't like. Yeah, exactly. People learn differently. No one method is best for all. In fact, no one method can do it all. So it's compounded by the fact that no one method can do it all. Not only for one person, then one method to do it all for everyone. That's absurd. That's doubly absurd. So, oh, and you're Floridian? Okay. Do you plan on moving to Japan soon or being in Japan? I plan on visiting Japan in the near future. Everyone should take their own path that works best for them. Duolingo is fun and that makes it easy to keep up with doing it every day. Yeah, I use Duolingo to inspire me to do other things with Japanese every day. You respect my self-confidence. I should channel it more. You guys want something to read? You guys want something to read? I already talked about this earlier today. The reason why I'm late to my normal stream time is I made a comment in it's a good summary of my feelings so far. I made a comment on day 60 part 1 to the newest person who wanted to comment on what I'm doing, or at least what they think I'm doing, and it kind of summarizes as hard as I can, as more meaningful as I can in a smaller volume. As in, I needed to challenge myself to explain all my motivations, all the 400 hours I've poured into this, into like one essay. So I did write my thoughts regarding the common thing, and I'm pretty sure it's yeah, it's day 60 part 1. It has the tag 172 at the end. Whoops, I said 2 and you'll get an idea of pretty much what my sentiments are regarding that. It's a super common. It's 9 out of 10 interactions, but I really appreciate Hank and Carl for being part of the greater language learning community. To me, that's what language learning is about. It's absolutely great. Yeah, it inspires for doing other stuff within the language. Exactly. Exactly. If Duolingo lacks something, that means you know what it's lacking, right? Go out and find it. If it means stopping Duolingo, Duolingo led you towards whatever it is that you need. Go for it. Like, I'm not gonna keep you here. I don't work for Duolingo. So far, all the times that people have critiqued Duolingo, they have offered advice on it, and I still take those advice to some extent, unless they're attacking me as a person, which that's kind of tough. But most of the time, I've been plugging all the stuff, so it's everything. The only reason I'm streaming Duolingo is I think you can't really stream any other things. Like, I don't think I have the clear green light to stream other people's content, and especially paid content. So I can't like go around and subscribe to, I don't know, Rosetta Stone or something, and then spend hours revealing what their content is without like other people paying for it, that kind of thing. So you can't really actually do that. So I still use Duolingo in that case. And I've entered a lot of fun discussions. In fact, someone accused me of speedrunning in that comment. That person said the irony is I just spent 5 hours grinding Duolingo to speedrun. What have I been doing the last 30 to an hour right now? It's definitely not speed grinding Duolingo, whatever that means. Like, there's no irony here. So 300 to 400, half those number of hours is about talking about the fun parts about learning a language, the ups and downs about learning a language, things that worked and things that didn't work for people. I think that brings people together instead of pitting them against each other. Oh, you're team Anki. Well, I'm team Memrise. We hate each other mutually. Let's draw some lines. I don't particularly prescribe to that. I think I see way too much of that nowadays. It's the hyper objectivity of learning in general. My method's better than yours, so we can't be friends. Not a fan, personally. If I had to share an opinion, I'm not a fan of that. That's dividing language learning. Now at this point, I want to go for at least 3 weeks at a time. My job doesn't let me take that much time off at once. I see. I'm thinking at least 7 to 8 years before you go. All right. You sound like a very marathon-oriented person, and I can get behind that. If there's any person that's in for the marathon, I definitely can resonate with the idea of taking your time and being prepared. Like 1 day at a time kind of thing. Thank my inspiration to learn Russian was your girlfriend. I see. I want to learn more about her and be able to communicate with her family as their English is not brilliant. Yeah, fair enough. You've been playing the long game for sure? Yeah, I'm playing the long game. Like, if someone... It's going to be more frequent for me, right? Like, I'm not gonna stop using Duolingo because someone else told me to stop using Duolingo. However, in order to make this successful, it has to require someone who's in it for the long game. So how much patience do I have to repeat the same general concept and improve upon it over and over again? Well, that comment I made today is a refinement, an essay that I've been doing for the last, I'm going to say the last 43 times since I started Duolingo. It's almost like every other day soon. In fact, this time in the last 4 or 5 days, since the number is going up, right? The 63 is going up. Every other day I encounter someone who is going to tell me the same thing. And sure enough, I'm ready to respond to them, because you cannot understand 400 hours of things by looking at my title for 10 seconds, skipping around my video for 30 seconds, and think language learning can be summarized in 30 seconds. Like, that to me almost tells me that the person who's learning the language doesn't care about, in my opinion, doesn't care about language learning as much as they think. It has really opened my eyes to how hard other languages are to learn and how different they are from English. Agreed. And honestly, I found out that I have lots of gaps in my English knowledge. If you read something I write, it might sound very impressive, but in my opinion, I think I write a lot better than I speak in English, because or I write in much more complex tones than I speak colloquially, oftentimes because speaking requires a different subset of skills in a language than it is to read. So in Japanese, when I'm learning Japanese, I'm getting a even bigger reminder of the differences between speech in colloquialism, right? Like things that feel natural spoken, and then what are the elements that are used for literacy. And in English, it is very obvious by the way Duo is translating Japanese into English. That reminds me of how spoken English, especially where I'm from, I suppose, in a little generalization, spoken English is night and day with written English. And I do this a lot. So whenever someone sees what I've written, it's very different from how I speak. If I were to read out what I wrote today in 3 hours, it would sound almost incomprehensibly verbose in speech. So a lot of times when learning a language in this type of format or other types of format, you're doubly learning. So embrace it, I suppose. Find ways to engage your different disciplines, because oral communication is light years different from the discipline of writing the language. Even in English, even though some people say that their English is fantastic, their written English is for lack of a better word, requiring some reevaluation. And learning another language can open the lens to that. I have gaps. I have gaps in my English, the fundamental gaps, largely because most of the translation they use for Japanese in Duolingo is fundamentals. And I keep asking myself questions like, wait, do I really say that? Maybe I don't say that. What does that even mean in English? That kind of thing. It happens a lot. I started watching sumo. Oh, sumo in 2019, about 2 years ago. I learned hiragana, katakana through Anki. Okay, it took about a month. Nice, nice. When the next sumo tournament came, I realized I could read the wrestler's name. That made me hungry to learn more. Oh, that's incredibly endearing. I love that. Anyway, nice to meet you. Oh yeah, take care. Oh, hey. You're in the UK. Oh, you speak British English. We're gonna have to talk about British English sometime. Or like compare and contrast, because I obviously from my accent you probably assume I'm American, so I'm an American English speaker. So yeah, thanks for stopping by, Carl. Good luck with everything, and sleep well. And obviously Hank and I are in the same time zone. We're East Coasters. Yeah, take care, Carl. Good luck. Oh, and the wrestling thing, I learned sounds, Hank, to relate to you. I learned sounds in Japanese solely for the purpose of pronouncing names. So I played a lot of Japanese games and all that stuff. And the one thing that I could ham hard is that most of my pronunciations of Japanese before I started learning Japanese formally, like 63 days ago, I guess, is that the sounds are because I wanted to pronounce people's names, like places names and stuff, like Tokyo, Kyoto, like Hanaka, Akira, right? Akira is a big one because it's the name of a very, very influential anime movie. So things like that, like Miyazaki, Kojima, lots of names come up all the time in video gaming. So naturally, the sounds that I've learned was that. And then kana, I learned from Duolingo. Like straight up. Just that kana section, like the hiragana and katakana section, was bootstrapped it for the first 2 weeks. I still make mistakes though. I obviously still make reading mistakes because of dakuons. So I haven't practiced like like dakuons. These things I do still get confused with dakuons from time to time. So that was not practiced. So I still need to get used to which dakuon is which dakuon. But in terms of the actual character itself, not so much. Although katakana throws me for a loop every once in a while. Katakana does throw me for a loop sometimes. Like chi and te, right? Chi and te. Sometimes if I'm like glancing by, I would mix these two, and then if you add a dakuon on it, I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah, so these are a very common one for katakana. Yeah, the AI voice can throw off. I agree. I absolutely agree. Does it make me feel angry though? It doesn't make me feel angry, because if I can make it out, I'm like, whew, that's something. As long, I know what it's supposed to sound like sometimes, and I'm like, okay, because you can't know if it sounds off if you don't know what isn't off, right? So oftentimes I'm, whoa, that's weird. And to me, it's not a very negative feeling, although it is a very big source of negative feeling for a lot of people who use Duolingo. The synthetic voices, it like triggers them. So if it does trigger you, don't use a product that keeps triggering you, for sure. But what I don't welcome is someone telling me that it's triggering me. Like, kind of like the advice where like I should be upset. Like I should be upset. That's what the advice always. The lots of advice come off as this way, as in, dude, man, why aren't you upset about this? I'm like, well, I mean, it's fine. Daijoubu desu. Daijoubu desu. Like, it's a synthetic voice. Like, I'm actually impressed. Do you know where synthetic voices are? Like, the idea that Duo is using more technology and constantly moving forward, that's impressive to me. Not for language learning per se, I suppose, but it's brave. It's brave and cutting edge, in my opinion, to bank on synthetic voices. Like, they're doing the long game. That's what I mean by resonating with Duolingo. It's the long game. They're establishing a core of synthetic voices that they are constantly going to train into the future. They've already done their foray into chat GPT model training, like specific model training. Obviously, it's super expensive and it's under the Max feature, but they're doing it with people who are invested in that. I don't have monetary investment that can support a Max subscription. However, they're moving forward. It's the long game. It's a huge long play. So while I know people want quick results, they're all about quick results, right? Quick results. Lots of quick results. Like, oh yeah, this is the best way. This is the best way right now. This is what's trending. I get it. I totally get it. But Duolingo also represents a technology, and that's kind of pretty sweet. And I understand the limitations right now, the current limitations, at least to some extent, of synthetic voices. But it is an investment to the future. Like, you can't have someone tirelessly be ever flexible than a synthetic voice model, in my opinion. So, I can accept it for what it is. Just another reason for multiple resources, right? In fact, I would argue it would be fun to sound like an AI voice. Like, what I mean is, voice act. You know how like people voice act. If you wanted to sound like a Japanese AI voice, this would be a funny way of applying that. So whenever like someone says like, but you're gonna end up sounding like a Duolingo fluent, and I'm like, yeah, okay, all right. Does that stop someone from finding it funny and communicating with me in Japanese? No, it doesn't. Unless they hate me, then that's fine. I'm okay with being not talking to someone who hates me because I learned Duolingo. That is so different, and that is the conversation I have most of the time. They're like, oh yeah, I care about you, like, it doesn't hurt to help people. It's like, but you're using strong language. You're saying something I do is worth nothing, that people who use this tool is worth less. You're constantly implying that, yet you think you are trying to tell me you care about my well-being. It's kind of a mixed message. I'm getting a mixed message here. What did you say, Lotus? Daijoubu. Oh my gosh, it's so hard to see Daijoubu. Sorry, you already spoiled me, Lotus. You already spoiled me. That the 3 kanji, I see it in my head. The 3 kanji for Daijoubu. And then when I look at the kana, I'm like, yeah, daijoubu desu, yo, right? Daijoubu desu, yo. It's kind of like it was really simple actually. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, this. I'm gonna guess. It's like it's maybe. And then perhaps this. Yeah, I'm used to seeing this already. Even though I haven't been taught it yet, I'm used to seeing this every time, and I need to read that. It's like dai yo. Anyways, yes, daijoubu desho, right? Daijoubu desho. And this is gonna be a new video, by the way. We're gonna lop this up and put this in another video. And it's just gonna be titled Daijoubu desho, I suppose. Perhaps. Not to I'm gonna stop using the word gatekeeping from now on. I think maybe I'll put in quotes when I really want to throw in and hammer it. But generally speaking, there is this one gigantic gate for the last time, so that I don't like make this the whole point of the rest of my digressions. There's a giant gate that everyone contends with, and that gate is emotional and psychological. It doesn't take a literal gatekeeper, like another gatekeeper, to stop you. You can stop yourself. And to me, the thing that I want to kind of raise awareness about is that when you use this as a technique, if your comments and advice starts with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, what makes you any different for those people who utilize FOMO? This contributes to a gate. It stops so many people from starting. It's a literal gate, or a figurative gate, I guess. Both figurative and literally felt gate. So when you tell me that Duolingo is a waste of time, that's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And a lot of people say, well, it's not, well, I'm encouraging other useful techniques. Like, yes, that's good. Encouraging other techniques, for sure. However, you created a gate here using fear for Duolingo. Duolingo is something originally accessible, right? But through your advice, you are making this inaccessible by forming a gate of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That is gatekeeping, in my opinion. Very respectfully so. Fear is a great motivator to stay away from something. If there's anything that I can relate to fear, uncertainty, and doubt, is multiculturalism. The Asian face culture. If you fear, I don't know, loving someone, that's a gated community. You can't join people in love. Right? Let's not use love then. Face culture. Saying your Japanese is good. Cue the Nihongo Jozu, right? Nihongo Jozu. Is that how you say it, actually? Face culture creates a gate. Nihongo ga jozu. Oh yeah, Nihongo ga jozu desu ne. Right? It's a gate. But gates can be good. They can be harmless. Right? Right? It's up to the person interpreting it. It could be motivating as well. I'm not saying gatekeeping is negative, but it can still be gatekeeping. So when someone tells you that phrase, "Nihongo ga jozu desu ne," they can see it as a mental gate. Like, I haven't entered the gate yet. As in, oh, I'm not good enough yet to open the gate. And here I watch, yeah, Dogen does it a lot. I think Dogen, I'm not a very funny person, and I don't like I don't think of skits and stuff, but Dogen has a patented brand that diffuses things like this so that there's a light spark of humor and still be encouraging while like downplaying some of the, in my opinion, gatekeeping that is unintentional. I think it's coming from a high standard and a place of potential compassion. Like, you want people to learn fast, quick, embrace the like speed of trying to get really fluent so that you can welcome them into your community, right? Until you abandon. But these people didn't do it that way. They're saying until you abandon Duolingo, you cannot become fluent. That is the subtext of their advice. And my rebuttal is, hey, guess what? I use other methods too. The only thing you see on video is you're assuming that's the only thing I do. But have you watched my videos? I actually talk to other people half the time about other things, other methods. I am genuinely curious. I genuinely ask whenever a new stranger asks, hey, what are you using to use a language? Because Duolingo enables language learning. It doesn't make language learning less accessible, right? Like, it's making language more accessible. So if you say you're not gatekeeping because you're encouraging other methods and shutting the door on something that's accessible, then you are unemphatically proving my point in saying that you're making something inaccessible. I get so tired, in my opinion, like, in a way, not really negative, but it's a common occurrence where people take something literally and say, oh, hey, gatekeeping is making something inaccessible. Well, when you make something accessible, inaccessible to them, that is gatekeeping. Gatekeeping goes two directions. It's a gate that keeps people out, and it's a gate that keeps people in, and a gate that allows people from the outside to enter. That is what a gate does. So, are they missing that it's only designed to lay the groundworks? Hank. Hank, the way you ask that is pretty funny, because the answer, they probably agree that yes, it only lays the groundwork, right? But the argument is at me. If you read the comments that I've responded to, it's at me for using Duolingo, not Japanese learning. Most of the comments are attacking me, as in because I'm a part of the Duolingo community, as in like they think I'm a gated community. As in, oh, I must be so narrow-minded because I've spent 300 hours on Duolingo. This guy must only use Duolingo, and they always go out of their way to defend Duolingo. And that's all they do, and they're wasting their time because I'm narrow-minded. I can't see that there are other methods that are... Those are the types of responses. It's an attack. It's a ad hominem critique of me as a person. Not that. So while they're busy saying they care about language learning, if I know anything about you, it's not that you're narrow-minded. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I wanted to tell people, right? But the problem is, and I get it, I totally get why people get that impression, because I only release Duolingo stuff, right? I only release under Duolingo. So it's understandable. It's very understandable that the first impression you would likely get, and you're used to short formats and whatnot, if you see someone who posts 63 days of Duolingo, you are likely to assume they only use Duolingo, right? That's perfectly reasonable. And then it is up to me to try to at least try to dispel any misunderstanding. There's a very pragmatic reason that I use Duolingo, and it often deals with the business side of things, like the pragmatic side of things. Maybe we'll tackle Anki and the rest in the future, and I already know that we're going to do something else because Lotus here have provided me with something else. I actually think looking at notes from other people learning Japanese is pretty boss. So we're not going to even get to Anki. I don't even think Anki is interesting anymore. If you want to learn about how to use Anki, I'm sure there's a lot of other people. But we're talking about being open-minded. So incorporating new things. So how do I learn from Duolingo? Well, it's not an open challenge, but I'm going to tell you now. If you look through just one day or maybe even 2 days of Duolingo, of my sessions, it is not what people are doing with Duolingo. They don't sit here and talk about this thing scribbling on the screen nonstop. That's why I'm inefficient, right? I don't spend 30 minutes bootstrapping through Duolingo. I spend 30 minutes talking with other people about language learning and all my thoughts in it. And it welcomes discussions. So of all the things, the biggest irony here is the particular comment was that I sound ironic, or I think the word they're looking for is I sound hypocritical most of the time. That is inherent to someone who is not narrow-minded. As in, if you're open-minded, if you spend hours of doing something and always trying to welcome new ideas, at any one point, those ideas are going to be hypocritical to something else. Being narrow-minded means you have no capacity to be hypocritical, right? If you are narrow-minded, that is literally the idiom of being straight and narrow. Straight and narrow. Like if we're talking about using idioms to portray something, do you know what narrow-minded is? Well, it's straight and narrow. It's straightforward. It's direct. Of all the people, in my opinion, to call me or insist that I sound hypocritical, I acknowledge that, actually. I'm actually not going to deny that. It is incredibly hard to not be hypocritical at any point if you're open-minded. It's exceedingly difficult. If you are narrow-minded and you focus on one thing, you rarely disagree, like inconsistent, because you're hyper-focused on that. There was another comment from a fun YouTube video, and I want to end it on this. I wasn't expecting to digress today, but thank you. I really appreciate it, Hank, Lotus, and Carl, who's not here anymore. Who's off to bed. I want to end with the idea of what was it? I think it was something like if two people agree, right? If two people agree, they are either smart / correct, right? Or they are both idiots. I forgot what the idiom is, but someone can inform me what the idiom is. But if a lot of people agree, they are either all smart and correct, or they are all idiots. This is the essence of narrow-mindedness. Or groupthink. Groupthink is probably the phrase I would use. Groupthink. So, hey, if you want to peddle that, fair enough. I'm going to be wrong and right consistently throughout. There are going to be things that agree with you. There are going to be things that disagree with you. And then tomorrow, you might agree with different things and then disagree with different things, because my mind is not narrow. It changes rapidly to the point where it's way too hard to summarize to someone who makes a comment and only see what they want to see. And it's kind of refreshing if the comment actually showed me that they saw something. So in this comment that this recent person talked about, they brought up the word gatekeeping cope. And to me, it was really great because it also means that they saw something in the video before writing the comments. Actually, 90% of video comments that I've seen so far pertaining to me did not share an indicator. And when I spoke to these people as rationally as I can, they ultimately concede that, yeah, it's true, we jump to conclusions. It's like, but I still stand firm by my opinion. And I'm like, I respect that. You have your opinions? Or actually, most of the time they say the facts. My facts are correct, regardless if I jump to conclusions about you. So sorry about jumping conclusions about you. That's a fact, right? After the fact. And then they say like, but all the facts that I say are correct. And I'm like, okay, well, fair enough. I'm not here to convince you that your facts are not correct. I'm here to express that I get to choose to believe you. Right? That's an entirely different story. If you care so much about my well-being and the well-being of other learning language community members, if you can't even exercise a minuscule amount of compassion to care about how the other person interprets your words, then what do you expect the other person to say? You care about me by not caring about me? That's... If there's anything I'm hypocritical about, I am certainly not hypocritical about investing just as much time as the other person is willing to invest in me. In fact, I would say I want to double down my efforts. So if you spent only 2 sentences stripping me of all my efforts and, commentary and stripping me down to like 10 seconds you watched of a 5-hour video, then I will at least spend more than 20 seconds writing my response. And in this comment, I spent 4.5 hours. So that person who wrote that comment, good luck, I suppose. Good luck with everything. It's very clear that you don't care about me. That's perfectly fine. I'm not the main character in anyone's universe. So, fair enough. But I challenge anyone to read my post and tell me that that is someone that doesn't care about language learning. If I give off that example that I'm so narrow-minded that I reject other people's things because this person literally accused me of holding a double standard for Duolingo because I don't say anything about any other thing other than Duolingo. I always defend it, and I'm always like talking about its flaws. Like one of the things that that person pointed out, which indicated that they actually watched the video, was that they said that I was excusing Duolingo's flaws by saying I don't want to speedrun it. And then they said, but I grind Duolingo. So isn't there an irony here? And I made a rebuttal to that too, by the way. When you speedrun something, speed is a rate of change. It's not a number of time. I could be spending 60 hours talking about Duolingo and doing nothing on Duolingo. That's not a rate of change. It has nothing to do with speedrunning. 63 days, how many of that proportion is actually using Duolingo? It's half, at least half of that. So you see what you want to see. I wrote in a really, really cogent response, hopefully, and it probably has run-on sentences and grammatical mistakes. It's very heavy-handed. It's how I write English. My writing in English, I think, is far more sophisticated than my speaking language, right? As well, it's so sophisticated sometimes that it's to a fault, as in it's probably very hard to read and very hard to understand. That's perfectly understandable. But it is me trying to put in as much effort as I can for someone who's willing to put their pride and arrogance on the line to tell me what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. So, hey, embrace the idiocy or embrace the genius. I could be wrong, you know, I could be wrong in 300 days. Am I going to be upset or regret or wasting time? Statistically unlikely. Very, very statistically unlikely. I will have a lot of friends. I hope to have a lot of colleagues by the time this journey ends. And where does this journey end? I have no idea. And I'm not looking at the end of the journey. I'm looking at what is happening in front of me. There are lots of respectable people in the Japanese learning community, and I hope to highlight those people and not let the growing, trending toxicity in the Japanese learning community to outshine people who just like to learn a different language and sharing that language instead of constantly talking down and second classing other people's methods. It's pretty, I don't blame for a lot of people who quit Duolingo. And I actually think people who quit Duolingo now are not necessarily due to Duolingo's flaws. It's actually due to the toxicity and animosity that's going towards people who are associated with Duolingo. There is a point, in a tipping point, where when I ask someone, does Duolingo work? The first response they give me is, I heard and told Anki is faster. Who's gating who now? Right? Like, who's gating who? You don't think this is a form of gatekeeping? Duolingo is inaccessible. To anyone who excludes Duolingo. So when you're reading your internet posts and all that stuff, especially this, and the facts are 20 for the Japanese people, right? Pre 2023 Japanese, it's not the same as post 2023 Japanese. Even then, even if I discard this is still gatekeeping. So lots of times, in fact, the reason people quit, I asked them, like, why did you stop using Duolingo? It's like, all my friends and other people use other things. Use other things. There's a point in this discussion that it's no longer about the flaws that end up making people quit Duolingo. It ends up being doomsaying, FUD, and gatekeeping. And you know what I've said to that recently? I no longer have the goal of being fluent in anything. because now, in order to make myself not be a criminal or someone that's outside something, I use the phrase Duolingo fluency. Because what I'm really doing is I'm using Duolingo. This phrase is a gatekeeper's categorization. I am not someone who's learning Japanese. I am apparently someone who's learning Duolingo. And I am not someone that will become fluent in anything or like mix of anything because I will become Duolingo fluent. That is gatekeep speak. You are establishing that your community is more important than anyone else that differs. You give them names. You give them categories. You are from, okay, I like Fallout. I've been watching Fallout in Amazon because on Amazon it was a recent thing. I am from Vault Duolingo and you are from Vault 33. Congratulations. You have officially, literally established a gate between two communities. People who use Duolingo and people who don't. Right, flawed as it may be in places, you'll still make great strides. The reward comes breaking through stumbling blocks and you find yourself reinvigorated. I love that, Hank. It's beautiful. It's so beautifully written. I'm fortunate that I don't experience any of that as I'm going it alone. I know no Japanese speaker or really anyone also engaging in language learning. Yeah. So I don't want to make it sound like there are bad people exclusively. I actually think these people are very passionate. They're incredibly passionate and they know they worked super hard. I'm not saying they don't. They work super hard and they are trying to make it easier for me, right? That's the noble intent. They're trying to make it easier for me. I don't mind it. I don't mind it being hard. You know, that's the irony here, right? I don't mind working hard. In fact, the harder I work, the more I'm energized to continue working. So yeah, Duolingo doesn't give me grammar points. It doesn't. It really doesn't overall. It doesn't give grammar points, right? So I have to work harder. I have to work harder to find grammar points. Well, thank you, Tofugu. The people at Tofugu is absolutely amazing. So in the way they organize things. So thank you, Tofugu. So I worked harder to find the things that aren't there, right? So much like all these people who worked super hard, they went out to criticize someone who's probably more like me. I'm more likely to resonate with them, really. Right? Of all the people to make not friends with, I'm more likely to resonate with people who work super hard, stumbled along the way, and then now have this urge to be righteous and moral grandstanding and say, oh yeah, you know, I've gone through all of this. It's so hard. Don't do this. Don't do that. And to keep myself from that urge, I ask myself, why? Do I know why they're doing it yet? I should really go out and ask them why they're doing it. At least spend time understanding what is it. Like going up to someone and they're sparkling like sunshine, like Zari in Duolingo, just sparkling sunshine and having fun and talking to people. And the first thing you think is very helpful is, man, dude, you're wasting your time. And also all your friends who are talking to you, yeah, they're a waste of time too. Like, just skip that. Like, that's terrible. Why would you ever do that? You're only reinforcing bad Japanese between all of you guys. I'm like, well, you know, I wouldn't trade it. I would not trade it. Working hard has its flaws for sure. Working hard and not smart, right? And you don't have to tell me twice about working smart versus working hard, I suppose. Generally speaking, though, I'm not here to run a sprint. I'm here to run a marathon. So there are going to be people who learn way faster than me with other things other than Duolingo. I welcome them, because if they can find fun in educating me and preventing me, or like adding to my Duolingo fluency, I'm open arms. Absolutely open arms. I have the privilege 3 or 4 times, 3 Japanese speakers and 1 middle schooler. And the exchange that they had with other people who are learning Japanese, it was priceless. Absolutely priceless. So it's nice. It constantly reminds me that there are not these individuals. But you know, vocal minorities, you have to appreciate them as well. Vocal minorities are incredibly passionate as well. They're probably super fluent. The last 2 interactions I have no doubt that they know way more Japanese than I do. And they're probably sitting there feeling like they understand way more and appreciate way more. That's fair enough. About Japanese, I suppose. But I'm not coping with anything. I'm actually looking forward to it. There's a difference between coping. This person suggested that I was coping by using like words like gatekeeping and stuff. I actually find gatekeeping incredibly endearing. So contrary to what people believe, I suppose, or what this person believes, I find gatekeeping incredibly endearing. It means that they either care about the thing so much that they're willing to go out of their way to place their pride and arrogance on the line. And maybe, just maybe, I get along with these people and we learn even more together. Together as language learners. Not together as fighting and being bitter about who's on the right side and who's on the wrong side. Let's see what it hands out. I might end up talking about this one other time because I typed my response and it's pretty clear that this person operates in a different time zone. So perhaps they'll yell at me and say I'm a pompous jerk who only psychoanalyzes other people and stuff. That happens. So we'll see what direction it goes. But to me, that's worth it. It's worth getting to understand who your opponents are. Why make an enemy of an enemy without profiting or learning from your enemy? In fact, a lot of times, like in science, I said this multiple times, when you understand all your opponents, it only strengthens your resolve and strengthens your appeal and your stance on what you know, because your stance will incorporate everything your opponents can throw at you. So if you know everything your opponents throw at you, it's stronger for it. There are less holes. I think Duolingo has challenged me in ways that I didn't think I would be challenged. As in, the hard part about Duolingo, in my opinion sometimes, is making things that it lacks work for me. And how do I do that? I go out and look for alternatives. Sometimes in science, you gotta see what's not there as well as what is there. Know what you don't know and what you do know. It's not just what you do know. Ask yourself when you criticize me, the Sun Tzu approach. Yeah, the Sun Tzu approach. Yeah, I hear that a lot. Sorry, I haven't read The Art of War, like the Sun Tzu approach. However, over my life, a lot of people had told me, like, have you read Sun Tzu, The Art of War? And I'm like, I didn't get it for a very long time. And most people said, like, it's because that's one of the core approaches in the book, like in the book, right? And I had no idea. This is where I collectively experience based on teaching and interacting with a lot of people. You have to understand your opponents. In science, you are rigorously told that you have to formulate as many counter arguments to your stance. If you can do that, you can walk into any room and be like, if I know my opponents, there's no concern, there's no insecurity. You know exactly what they're thinking, like, or at least you have an idea. So you aren't lost. Now it's up to your opponent to get one ahead of you. But if you're always reading your opponent, you don't need to even defend yourself. You address your opponent's remark. You don't reveal your hand, basically, right? In the state of war, you don't do that either. Like, don't reveal all your hand. You only reveal just enough to get ahead of your opponent. Your opponent reveals their hand. You get your opponent to reveal their hand, and you read their hand. And you only use what you know unless someone's asking you for help. And no one's asking me for help. I'm usually the person in this situation that's less competent in Japanese. And I totally respect that, because I definitely am nowhere near competent enough. However, there are some people recently that started using Duolingo just for like a month or two. They already told me like after a month they're going to drop Duolingo to do like fluency teachers and stuff. That's fair, but at least in that period I can talk to them about it. Right there, I've gone long enough now where now I have both the experiences. One in a place of someone who has more competence, not just a person who has the least amount of competence. Right? I'm only 37 years old, so if you are substantially older than me, my likelihood, like in the Japanese culture, I respect seniority a lot. I actually greatly value wisdom over semantics. So if you're someone that says you have the kanji database of what so happens, I'm less impressed than demonstrating to me that you can read my mind and connect with me even at an old age. Right? That is the wisdom. That is the proverbial Chinese folktale about meeting a wise man, and they are able to ask the correct questions, the correct ideas, and give you things that breathe life back into your life, not to discourage you from living life. So it's one thing to elevate your position by putting someone else down, be it a product or an attack on the character. It's another thing to elevate both of you, elevating your opponent while also demonstrating that you understand your opponent. That takes, in my opinion, far more wisdom and more open-minded. You are far more enlightened when you try to take your opponent's position. So I understand Duolingo didn't work for them, right? And that's where I wanted to end this digression. It'll be placed up, I think, I don't know what I'm gonna call it. There's a central theme to this. I don't want to sound it like maybe too language learning is collaborative, not antagonistic. That's probably why I'm going to title the bit. Right. Thanks for listening. So now we're going to try to complete 11 lessons with new vocabulary. Okay, where were we? Oh, the new thing. This whole like using the negative, positive, or negative non-pass as a way to suggest something is kind of new to me.
今週末遊びませんか? 今週末
今週末 今週末
今週末遊びませんか?
遊びませんか? So I didn't think this was the way, but this is really interesting. And Duolingo didn't highlight that this is like a contextually new thing. It is a contextually new thing. It's super important too. Like instead of saying konshu matsu, like konshu matsu asobi mashoka, or asobi mashoka, they're using konshu matsu asobi masenka. So I'm curious. I'm gonna have to spend a little bit of my evening, maybe 2 or 3 hours, getting a feel for which phrase and how and where people use asobi masenka versus asobi mashoka, right? So
大阪で遊びませんか?
yep. And then there obviously Duo is gonna continue to do it this way with pretty much as many predicates as relevant to this topic. So, 大阪で遊びませんか? Okay. Would you like to hang out in Osaka? I wish one day, I look forward to one day being able to say this just for fun. Like, be in Osaka and then know someone from like Japan, maybe, and it's like, hey, someone's in Tokyo. It's like, hey, come down to Osaka. Like, would you like to hang out in Osaka? That would be pretty fun hypothetical situation. We're using this phrasing. Yes, grammar points need more in-depth description, but that may be gradually implemented. I honestly believe they're going to get to that point, Hank. Yes, it will be gradually implemented. For the time being, for someone like myself, I'm asking these questions already, right? So I'll find it elsewhere for now. I wouldn't have encountered Tofuku if Duolingo had all the grammar points. And I think, actually, I might. Sometimes when I get a grammar point from one tool, I check another tool for grammar points. So I want at least 2 or 3 different resources about the same things. So at some point, maybe I'll probably use Anki. For now, the way I'm using vocabulary is not overlapping with Duolingo yet. I actually use a YouTuber or a channel that uses all the N5, like the JPLT, like JLPT vocabulary, and they just leave like 5 seconds in between of all the vocabulary with like a flashcard basically. So no, I'm not using Anki, but I'm also actually using something else that someone else put time and effort into selecting and then already flashing it. So yes, you might be thinking, oh yeah, but this guy doesn't use Anki. How would they know how valuable Anki is? Well, I know the concept of Anki. And on YouTube, I actually do something very similar. It's someone who selected all the JLPT vocabularies, sort them by the levels, and they made videos where they flashed the kana, kanji, the English word, an image every 5 seconds. And they do it in like 25 sets. So I didn't even download Anki or find what the sets I want are. I picked something else to complement how Duolingo introduces vocabulary. So I keep telling people, like, nonchalantly, yes, Duolingo says I have about 850 vocabulary words, right? I technically have like 1,200 now vocabulary words. There are lots of non-overlapping vocabulary words that are in other people's like priorities than this. Like, for example, kisetsu. They introduced all the seasons, but kisetsu is one of the first words in the JLPT thing, seasons. They introduced weather, right? Tanki, right? Tanki or tenki. Yeah, tenki. The phrase for weather, as opposed to say haru natsu. So these words, there are a lot of words that fell through, like animals. Lots of animal words and geographical features like rivers and stuff. They're all there. So I didn't use Anki, but I definitely took inspiration from people who keep saying Anki, Anki, Anki. I did it something different. It's fine. Daijoubu desu. Daijoubu desu. Daijoubu desho. Right. I say I'm at a similar word level. Yeah. So I do invest a lot of time. I love the Japanese language, but I don't want to sound biased. I love learning more than the Japanese language. So the learning is the biggest part. If I can keep myself happy, motivated, even when people attack my character over and over again, Nothing really stops you. It doesn't have to be Japanese. It could be going on a diet. It could be treating yourself with confidence. It could be exercising self-love. It could be helping your friend through tough times. When you have the capacity to learn and constantly be motivated in learning, even when people criticize you and you still learn from their critical, like subjective, even possibly hateful comments, nothing really stops you, in my opinion. I'm not concerned. I am absolutely not concerned if I sound like a Duolingo AI Japanese speaker. In fact, I might actually deliberately use it to my advantage. Hey, guys, you know what I can do? I can sound like one of these Duolingo characters. You want to hear? It's gonna be pretty exciting. I actually don't know who I sound like. I honestly think I resonate most with... I want to sound like their synthetic voice for Oscar. That's who I want to sound like. Okay, maybe Falstaff. Falstaff is pretty good too. If I had like a female-ish persona, I do want to sound like Lily. So, hey, you might think this is cringe or something, but hey, I'm having fun. So, let me know which artificial voice you want to sound like when you're learning your language in Duolingo. I will tell you how to use all my wasted time to make money or success or what have you. If I'm presented lemonades or presented anything, hard work gives it polish. Not something that is prescribed by someone else. You do not hold ownership of things, of people telling you what to do. You hold ownership of the things you choose based on advice. So thank you for your advice, right? I thank you, stranger, for your advice, however emotionally charged it may be. I'll take your advice. I'll use it to my benefit. Know this, though. Since you're not learning anything from me, interacting with me, you don't get anything out of it. Besides the satisfaction of maybe seeing me successful, doing things that you didn't want me to do. So if that gives you some, value for your well-being, there you go. However, for me, I've learned something from you, and that's priceless. Whether it's the thing you intended or not, I've learned something from you. I don't waste my time trying to get self-satisfaction. I usually use my time to learn something at all turns of events. So give me a rock and I'll probably polish it to something useful. That's kind of how that works. If Duolingo is so flawed, I will make it work with other things or other techniques or what have you. It's an obstacle if you want it to be. Usually I work with something, not against it. You get bored through flashcard drills. This keeps me more engaged. I agree. I think I did the whole flashcard drills thing. I do it every 2 or 3 days. And I would do 100 at a time. So 25, 25, 25, 4 sets of 25. And I would do it 3 times over with a 30 second to a minute break in between. And then it's every 3 or 4 days. I write all my kana every 3 or 4 days as well. So every kana character, every 3 or 4 days. And then now I write all the kanji that's in the kanji section every 3 or 4 days. I don't habitually drill day after day. And Duolingo, it looks like I'm grinding every day on Duolingo, but usually I'm talking about something different during Duolingo. So every Duolingo day is actually different outside of this whole mechanical translating thing. So I'm in my head, I'm not actually doing the same thing every day. In fact, if you are still around, if anyone is still around, by the time 75 days roll over, I'm going to do my review for 75 days. And I'm going to do something different while I'm streaming Duolingo. after 75 days. And it involves a technique that my Spanish teacher used very, very well. And that is to consciously only speak in as many vocabulary as I can while I'm speaking to myself. I speak to myself all the time because that's part of streaming, right? Now instead, I'm gonna attempt to replace all my English words with Japanese words. So in the future, I'm gonna say, どこですか? 何は? Eh? I can't express this isn't right, is it? Or this isn't right, ですね? So a lot of times it's going to be broken, it's going to be hybrid, right? Where I will immediately input the English word where I don't have a word for it yet. But generally it's going to be a hybrid system where every time I make a comment to myself, I'm going to replace any word that I know in Japanese, regardless if it's broken or like out of context grammatically, in order to convey an idea. And that's how I use Fujonese and English. It's going to be back and forth. Like, for example, I asked my mother, like, Joongong Hospital. Why make a report card? He said, no. So that kind of thing. So this is the stuff that I do all the time. And I learned almost all of my Fujonese through the idea of being able to blend the thing, and it becomes second nature. And what happens is you either adopt the principal grammatical structure of the first language you deploy or the second language. I do that all the time already, but I haven't done it externally, as in I haven't done it vocally yet. So I will start at day 75 to do it vocally. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. So I'm trying to become more comfortable in improvising. Oh, you do that internally too, Hank? Yeah, exactly. So when up to this point, it hasn't become apparent that I'm doing this internally. Like sometimes I don't actually read the English translation, or like it takes me a while. Like, oh wait, okay, because I was thinking about Fujonese. I was thinking, how do I say this in Fujonese? Meanwhile, it's not audible, so you can't see it. You can't really see this happening. So I have to be a little bit more cognizant of doing this. So I will actively do this in the future. Not right now, though. My competency is... I still don't think like 1200 vocabulary is enough. There are very specific words that are still missing. I'll have a random thought and sometimes try to translate it. Yep. Yeah, exactly. I agree. It's one of those things that imagine trying to design a program that gets you to do that. I understand that there are a lot of people that attempt that. I don't know if it fits into what Duolingo's model is like, but there are other programs or the other tools that can get you to do that. You can still do it with yourself. Like what I mean is you can still engage in a similar way with yourself. And that's kind of what I do a lot of times. In Spanish class back in college, you only speak Spanish in Spanish class. Or you're encouraged to predominantly only speak Spanish in Spanish class. And it leads to mistakes, but it leads to wonderful things. Some people, like for me, I would even encourage a person, okay, so you don't remember the grammatical structure for Spanish. Use Spanish in the English structure and ask yourself what sounds weird and what doesn't, right? Because if you do it, you can actually end up catching like, oh wait, that kind of sounds weird. Let me rearrange it a little. And that's kind of the problem solving of using like, yeah, true, you can learn all about the grammar and try to remember it all before you start speaking. But you could speak and then troubleshoot through relying on your ears and your sight and other people's reaction while you're doing that. So this was inspired off of many of the multilingual, multiracial, cultural couples, when you see them talk, they would transition out of like German into English, then English into Vietnamese, and then back and forth. They would transition back and forth, and then you still understand what they're saying to some extent. Like even the English provides enough framework for understanding the context of the German or the Vietnamese, or you go between Malaysian English and Japanese, right? So it happens a lot. When I talk to my parents, it's a combination of English and Fujianese, because there are words, actually, there are literal words that cannot be communicated in Fujianese, but my parents find it normal to contextualize English words with Fujianese. So that's kind of what I'm going to do, and it's going to slow me down because I'm not speedrunning Duolingo. I don't know what gives people the impression that I'm speedrunning Duolingo. So I'm going to try to do that in the future. So it's going to be slow going at first. Like, 勉強しましょうか？日本語を勉強しましょうか? Or should I say しませんか? From today's lesson. Shall we? Would you like? Oh, wait. 一緒に日本語を勉強しませんか? Would you like to learn Japanese with me? There we go. That's kind of where I'm going. So not yet, because I just learned that vocabulary now. Yeah, so that's how we're gonna do it from now on. And definitely what goes on in my head when I'm learning new vocabulary. All right, now we really gotta complete these lessons.